Hello everyone, it's been a while since I've covered the special design of the Splatoon series, and today I wanted to take this time to do a bit of a longer video to revisit it with some harsher standards, with a few more things factoring into the ranking, and I'm really excited to make this a very big video. So I'm gonna just get into it and go through every special. We'll be going into categories that you can find timestamped in the description, and this video took a bit of extra work, so if you want to consider supporting me outside of the usual subscription, I have YouTube memberships you can find at the join button, and it gives you a little torpedo next to your name. But with that all out of the way, let's get into the ultimate special ranking. First up, we're going to cover some of the new specials, starting with the splatter color screen. Let's start with the positives first of all. I think that the special visually looks very cool. The wall is very imposing, it's very large, and it has that unique Splatoon vibe. I also think the effect of it is a really cool idea. It's a very colorful game, and the idea of draining some of that away as a unique status effect is a really neat idea. And it even comes with some extra counterplay, since when you get hit by the screen, you're unable to sharpen your ink thanks to these gray bubbles, which I think are a really cool detail. Screen adds counterplay to long-range weapons that is actually somewhat in-depth. You can partially see through the screen in some areas, so you have the ability to hit people, but it does block your line of sight. And Splatoon does need some specials that can deal with long-range weapons in unique ways, and this is one of them. Let's get to the downsides, though. The most obvious one is accessibility issues. Now, this has gotten better, and will probably improve further if anything sticks out for long. I know for some people the noise is still a problem, but regardless, the fact that it does have accessibility issues in the first place is a huge knock to the special. Outside of that, though, it also adds a lot of visual clutter. Screen is giant, and it lasts a long time. It's something that takes up the stage for a bit too much to me. I don't think specials in this game should be something that linger for a long period of time, and screen is one that is on screen far too long. No pun intended. I think screen is a bit unsatisfying to use. There's very little counterplay to make the screen end early in any ways. I think the effect and damage itself is just kind of weak. It works fine on a weapon like Full Squeezer that feels very powerful as is, but the second you attach it to even a mid-tier weapon, it starts to feel like a very mediocre special, Undercover being a good example of that right now. The special can block your own team's line of sight, which while it can be interesting in some ways, can lead to griefing in others, intentional or not. And in general, it's hard to rank a special in a tier list like this, given issues like that. So, while trying to factor in everything else about it, I'm gonna put it in mixed bag. Next up is Triple Splashdown. This is the first of two Splashdown reworks we're going to review here, and I think this is an amazing idea for what they did. Visually, the fists add on to what is already one of the coolest looking specials in the entire game, and it ups the amount of power that it feels like it has and actually has. On top of that, it fixes the main counterplay issue with Splatoon 2 Splashdown. Counterplay in Splatoon 2 was basically one phase. You shoot down the splashdown, and you win. Now, it is two phases. If you win the first phase, you shoot down the splashdown and die to the fists, which is still value, but not as much. However, if you play even better, you can try to shoot down the splashdown and move out of the way. By doing both parts of counterplay, you get even more value. This means on the opponent's side, Splashdown has more depth that I think makes it feel more satisfying to deal with than in Splatoon 2, while at the same time, the special itself feels a lot better. I think the fists add a lot of interesting depth to it. You can wall jump or have them land in different locations to cut off different retreat options. And since those fists are able to be shot down, that can also be countered. I think it's a really smart idea that adds to the depth of it. When talking about the downsides though, while the base Splashdown got way better in pretty much every way, Splashdown super jumping got basically gutted. Super jump Splashdown feels pathetically small to the point where I see most Splashdown users landing and then popping it on the ground to get the fist, because that's better half the time. While the less used part of the two specials is still important, and how it feels right now is kinda pathetic. Because of that, I think I would just put it in great. I don't think it has the insane amount of qualities as some of the specials that'll go in perfect to be higher, but if they can balance it a little bit better, maybe it has a chance to be a bit better than this. As a whole though, I think this is a very successful Splashdown rework that I would not mind seeing in any future Splatoon game. Next up is the final returning Splatoon 1 special, Kraken Royale. This is possibly the most iconic special in the entire series and one of the best visually. a giant squid monster called a kraken is something that's very common outside of Splatoon, and it would be a natural thing to fit in this game. I also think this is the special that feels the most powerful compared to where it is balance-wise. Kraken is around the middle of the road, but it's not super top tier. However, it does feel more broken than anything else if you're using it well, and I think that is really cool. I also think in terms of it being fun to use, it's one of the best. It feels like its own little mini-game in a way, where you get to chase down targets and don't have to worry about taking damage, which adds to a different feeling game for a little bit. The special is also a necessary counter to a lot of HP specials, as well as giving a lot of freedom of movement, allowing you to traverse the stage, which in this game adds a lot given how weak the maps are overall, even if we've had some new ones more recently. The startup and end lag was also made a lot better in this game. Kraken has the most startup of any special in the entire game at about 61 frames, and a reasonable amount of end lag, which means it's very easy for people to punish it. At the same time, Kraken isn't completely helpless. You can still swim a little bit when starting up, and use a squid roll close to where it's ending to be able to have a slight bit of movement. It feels punishable while having a lot of options. However, there is its fair share of negatives as well. The big one is Kraken's invincibility. There are many specials that have the inability to end them early, which is a negative quality, but it is most negative on this special. The inability to stop something from chasing you around the map for almost 8 seconds doesn't feel that great. And while there is still plenty of counterplay in terms of avoiding and punishing it, I think that pretty much every special should have a way to get rid of it early if play is done correctly. For Kraken, this should probably be way harder than shredding pretty much anything else in the game, but it should still be possible. I also think that Kraken has some jank objective interactions. In Rainmaker, you can charge through the Rainmaker and get some points nearly guaranteed. Most of this is probably due to lag, but it's still worth noting. The charge mode of the attack has complete knockback immunity, which actually removes counterplay compared to Splatoon 1 Kraken, where some weapons could reliably knock it back. Finally, I think there are also some jank interactions with Squid Roll in terms of the inability to parry it due to it being a multi-hit attack, which isn't great to me. I think this special could be a lot higher in a future Splatoon game with a bit more of a rework, and while it's made some progress from Splatoon 1, there's still more work that needs to be done. That all being said, it has a lot of extreme strengths and weaknesses, making it a mixed bag to me. In terms of the brand new DLC specials, we have Super Chump. For the positives, this is a very unique entry special in terms of it doesn't really force the enemy team to move that much. It's more about paint output, speed, and the ability to block some forms of damage. It has a very cool gimmick with the ability to fake having super jumps, a unique mechanic that, while it has counterplay, introduces new interactions that you can't see with any other special.
Onto the critiques, I actually think that the cooldown of Super Jump is a bit too large and feels unnecessary on this special. It doesn't suffer from spam, and you get less of it on retake. This is also the most nitpicky I'm going to be on power, but the special could be a bit stronger.
The only other critique I really have of it is that it is kinda hard to use the fake jump gimmick. I'm not sure how they could make this easier without breaking out of bounds glitch if you could super jump to where it is or massively buffing it, but it would be cool if there was some way to allow them to be a bit easier to use. As it stands though, it's still a great special that I've enjoyed being in the game, and I think if patches do a good enough job with it, it could even be imperfect. Next up, on Splatoon 3 Original Specials, let's talk about Zipcaster. This special allows the most amazing freedom of movement in the entire series. It feels great to use, has solid power being pretty well balanced, has a depth to be able to use it, and of course it has a very unique duration mechanic, being not just tied to the duration, but the ink consumption of your weapon and the arm itself. And on top of that, it is a recall special, and I think recalls introduce fair counterplay with the special having a vulnerability point as well as preventing it from moving forward. That's one of the few things to have armor in the game that actually feels pretty good. And while I'm not going to mention the other modes for a little bit, it creates some of the most fun single-player levels in the series. There is really only one downside I have with the special, which is that lag is not great at interacting with it, but even then that's mostly a Nintendo Switch Online thing. So I can't think of any other tier for Zipcaster to go into. Well, we've talked about one Splashdown rework, it's time to talk about the other one. Reef Slider. For the positives, the base idea to fix Splashdown does actually work. The idea of having a splashdown that you can activate from far away, then move into the location you can explode in, does fix its main problem of being punishable. I think Reef Slider visually fits Splatoon 3 very well. Riding an inflatable shark and being able to do an Akira slide is really cool, and having the pool floaties as an indicator of where you're going is neat. A very solid, simple special idea. On to the downsides though. The way they have decided to balance this special over the past year has been nothing short of horrible. The original radius buff to make it 70 was neat, and I like the rail paint. It's a good idea to allow you to more easily trap enemies. But they have made the startup a panic button for some reason. The end lag on the special feels horrible, and the invincibility feels more jank than helpful half the time. Slider cheese on zones or even using it to jump power clams feels awful in every way. I don't know, when your 70 damage explosion radius is this large and the special still sucks, there might be another problem. It might be the end lag. It's the end lag. Its startup is really awkward in the fact that you can't use it in the air or falling off a ledge without not actually having the startup. The path can be annoyingly misleading. Sometimes it looks like you're going off a ledge and you'll be able to go really far, and then it just blows up early. Out of any special on this list, this is one that could have been so much higher. This base splashdown rework idea was really cool, but it's been handled in some of the worst way possible, and feels extra pointless with triple splashdown and Kraken in the same game. And so I'll have to put it into bad. Next up is our first support special to be talked about, Ink Vacuum. For the positives, this is a support special with actual playmaking power and fun, which, as we'll see on this list, is a bit of a problem for most support specials, and I think is huge for the role. It encourages and teaches teamwork by encouraging you to protect teammates, which I think is very valuable, and the selfish reward of a powerful shot at the end is a great way to indirectly teach players to care about their teammates. Something that is desperately needed in a team-based game. I think it has decent depth to use, the ability to go into squid form and pop out to try to block different shots because of your limited turning speed is really cool. And I think there is also a lot of ways for enemies to punish it, whether it's filling up the vacuum, trying to shoot behind the vacuum, or having some things that can go through it like certain specials or weapons. It does have some negatives though. I think the ability to protect people for as long as you can is a little bit dumb. That can lead to some cheesy objective modes in things like Rainmaker. Even if it's not broken, it's overtuned. And I will be talking about some overtuned attributes. There can be parts of something that are too good at one thing without it being broken. That's the difference between overtuned and overpowered, and the absorption effect on vacuum is overtuned. And it is technically another form of zones cheese, though it does have a little bit more counterplay at least, so I don't think it's that big a point against it. Finally, I will also say that its weakness of being attackable from the sides and back is a little bit weird. I swear I've had times where I literally shoot the back of a vacuum with something like 96 gal and it just absorbs it anyway. Remove a little bit of the jank with the special, the zones cheese, and allow you to switch to the shot early, and I think the special would be perfect. But for now, I would still put it in great. Next up is Tacticooler. We got a lot to talk about here. For the positives, the effects Cooler gives in terms of its buffs make many weapons feel more powerful and brings back a balanced version of Splatoon 1 quick respawn that activated every time you died. That has helped meta diversity quite a lot in terms of the front lines, not in terms of backlines and supports. It is also an interesting way to nerf sharking, since it prevents you from hiding in your own ink, and it forces teams to clump up, which leads to counterplay options when going to grab the Cooler. However, Cooler has some pretty big problems too. The duration for this special is absolutely absurd, and it is very annoying to tell when the Cooler ends. The stand itself lasts 13 seconds, then whenever you grab a drink, it lasts minimum 17 seconds with special power up to 25 seconds, and there's no indicator for when that buff is going to run out. There have been plenty of times where I push with the Cooler effect and die just a second or so after it ends. The stand is completely unbreakable for enemies, literally only from the stage, which is a huge lack of counterplay for something that lasts as long as it does. The effect of Special Saver is a bit dumb at its maximum quality. Allowing opponents to completely respawn with their specials is just a little bit too strong. And it means sometimes you can win the fight and then come back and they just have all their specials to immediately re-wipe you. On top of that, for the Tacticooler user, it's not really satisfying to use at all. You kind of just pop it and throw it in a reasonable location. It's a bit more than stuff like Splat 2 armor, but that's a very low bar. Given its spot in the meta right now, it feels like a requirement, and in solo ranked, if you're fighting a team with Cooler, without one of your own, it feels pretty horrible. Now these are mostly small problems, all things considered, but it is a decent amount of downsides that have issues that add up. Ideally, my form of Tacticooler is some kind of team ability outside of any weapon or special in the game, basically making it some form of mechanic, and that's what I'd want to see for Splatoon 4. But in terms of how it functions as a special, I think it's mostly good, but with some important downsides, and I could see it being higher if it was reworked a little bit. The Crab Tank. Crab has insane depth with multiple different firing modes and a ball form, which give you a lot of different options between hitting behind walls, painting, a damage mode that's great at shredding areas, and all of these have reasonable counterplay with the limited damage on the area of effect at 30 if you don't hit a direct, which is pretty low, as well as the charge up mechanic for the standard fire. There is an amazing mechanic with the Crab Rider and its ball form. Crab is very laggy to shoot after going into ball form, and on top of that, whenever you are firing, you are vulnerable on the top of it. Meaning outside of just shredding the crab, any form of damage that can force you into the ball form acts as a reasonable counterplay. And the slow speed crab provides gives it a unique weakness, with a overall balanced duration of 8 seconds, as well as solid startup and end lag. This is another special that's very flexible, working on pretty much any weapon, which, given how dumb some of the kits can be in this game, I think is very helpful. For the negatives, I guess it has some small stalling issues, most of which have been adjusted already in balance changes though. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, you can guess where this one goes. It's pretty damn cool. Next up are missiles, and I'm gonna count Killer Whale here, because while they have some differences, they are nearly identical in terms of how they're used. In terms of the positives that apply to both specials, they look kind of cool, I guess, and have some shot calling potential if you're in a voice chat. And for missiles only, I think the 10-second cooldown is pretty nice. That's good to make sure they're not being spammed a lot. Yeah, positive. Okay, that's it. On to the negatives! Both of these specials have a horrible lack of counterplay. There is pretty much nothing you can do. Even Kraken, you could hide or be far away or on an annoying object. Now here, it is auto-lock global range special with annoying effects that either feel weak or way too strong. Now, the argument for specials like these for the longest time has been, okay, but we need them to deal with backlines. Without stuff like missiles, how are we going to have backlines be fair? How can we counter them? And Splatoon 3 said, okay, well, we got Zuko, we got like Zipcaster, we got Crab Tank, you can even have stuff like Vac block shots a little bit technically, you can have Screen block the point of view of the charger. And, yeah, okay, so we don't need these. This game has been very clear in proving that we don't actually need these long-range displacement specials. And on top of that, if you're a charger player, you have counterplay to the Zipcaster. You have counterplay to the Crab Tank. You don't really have a lot of counterplay to missiles. You have to move. You're not going to be shooting. The enemy team going to walk in. That's it. It is a boring interaction. On top of that, these two specials are so similar to each other. Anyway, onto the exclusive negatives, because there's more. Killer Whale 5.1 feels incredibly unintuitive and jank to use, especially in Salmon Run. The way you lock onto people just feels super awkward, even after they tried to make it better. There is some cooldown with Killer Whale to where you can point the lasers at people and die and respawn with some of the special. With Cooler, this means you can, like, lock on, have a full duration on someone, and respawn with, like, 80% of the special? Hello? Why is this a mechanic? And Missiles has its own exclusive negative. 2 of them, in fact. First off, you get even more free location to be able to target people better, so you can see them before you even launch the missiles, which is also very dumb. A Splatoon 3 exclusive thing is there is a screen shake effect with missiles, which is disruptive and annoying. I think it's pretty clear where both of these specials are going to go. They just straight up aren't needed. It's an outdated archetype, and both of them don't even feel particularly good to use and feel horrible to fight. Next up, let's talk about Inkstorm. For the positives, I'm a bit biased here. I gotta say, this is something I find cool. Maybe you guys don't. I think Storm visually is awesome. The idea of summoning a giant rain cloud is really, really awesome. I personally love it. On top of that, I don't think it has any insanely harmful effects. The displacement is more gradual, which is actually pretty good in my opinion. It does have some negatives though. Inkstorm used to be able to smokescreen people by throwing it so that the storm itself, like the little cloud thing, would be on terrain. This could be seen on something like Manta for the middle area, which was really cool and some depth to the special. In this game, the storm cloud is transparent, and it's not a thing. I do not know why we took this out. This was a special that had very little depth anyway, and we removed the one cool tech it had. Amazing. On top of that, the special has a long duration, a boring effect, and limited counterplay to stop it early. It just doesn't really fit the series anymore. Like, it was fine in Splatoon 2, and while it's not harmful, in a game where specials are trying to feel more satisfying and eventful, Storm's just kinda there.
Now, the lack of depth was addressed in a patch, giving Storm the ability to allow you to heal better. If the storm is over you, it's basically treated like you're in swim form, as long as you don't take any form of damage. The way this is implemented prevents the healing effect from being annoying or overtuned in any way, while adding a bit more depth to the special. I'd still definitely say Storm is lacking and feels like a Splatoon 2 special brought over to this game than one that's been adapted to fit Splatoon 3, but it's definitely more positive than negative, and if they go with some other changes to add a little bit more to it, I could see it being a good fit for this game. So for now, I'll put it in mostly good.
Alright, that's been some lower rated specials. Let's jump over to Inkjet. In my Splatoon 2 special design video, my hope was a more powerful special that was easier to counter without the existence of ink armor. Additionally, in a separate video where I talked about a possible jetpack rework for Splatoon 3, I wanted more depth with a movement option, with my idea being a shot that pushes you back. While it didn't happen in the same way, both of these actually happened. For the positives, Inkjet has insane depth to use with a very impactful power stat. It has a unique form of movement and weapon, while Squid Form is still useful to mess with your mobility, hitbox, and even swim in your own ink. The recall and limited air mobility gives it a lot of reasonable counterplay, and it has neat extra depth with the ability to easily parry the shots, which creates some of the hypest plays in the series. Now, Inkjet's not perfect. It does have 50 damage, which is a pretty crazy hitbox for something with a decent size and a lot of range. However, I think since the nerf, the hitbox size is fairly reasonable, and parrying is still a valuable option against it. It can also go a little bit too high sometimes with its boost mechanic, which is what functions as the dodge. But even with that, the shot velocity means there is still downsides to being there, and I think that's not perfect and could be argued to be a stage issue. As a whole, the Inkjet rework did everything I wanted it to do, and of course with that in mind, I can't put it anywhere else but perfect. An amazing improvement from a good concept in Splatoon 2. Next up is the DLC Splatoon 2 specials. First up, the Booyah Bomb. Now, for the positives, this is a humongous W visually. Referencing Dragon Ball with the Spirit Bomb is already really cool, but on top of that, we've added a Super Saiyan 2 lightning effect to it. Like, come on, that's awesome. It works on pretty much any weapon, is very great for continuation, it has balanced HP since its adjustments in Splatoon 2, and the Booyah Bomb itself is easy to paint over since it expands slowly from the center outwards, and even teammates booyahing has reasonable counterplay by giving away their locations, which is also just a cool mechanic. Now, there are some negatives. There's a 9-second stall duration, which I think is really stupid, especially on tower control. You can just kind of sit in the air and hold a Booyah Bomb to throw at people. But outside of those odd interactions in tower control, I think it's mostly fine. I would say though, it is a bit of a big problem, and given that it has HP, can still have some unfortunate interactions, so to me, it just barely misses the perfect tier. Ultra Stamp, the special that's been pretty much at the top of my special design list from the very beginning, and this is the first time it's not gonna be there. So let's start with the negatives, because this list is a bit higher than usual. Balance-wise, this special has felt kind of horrible and been actually horrible for like 5 years now, which is kind of crazy. We gave it an outside hitbox, which I do think has some nice depth to it, but it's also entering dumb hitbox territory with just how big it is given it's a 3-shot. Finally, the special is odd with how splatlings, shooters, and dualies are able to interact with it so easily, whereas many other weapons can't. It feels unusually biased to those weapon classes, and I don't like how that works in comps. None of these are the most insane issues, but it is enough to bump it down. Now, of course, Stamp does have a lot of positives. It has unique counterplay with how the special blocks damage, allowing you to be hit from the sides and back, multiple uses for its modes with a jump, swing, rush mode, and a throw. And on top of that, the throw itself is a great way to end the special early, something Vac could learn from, with important utility for when you want to switch back to your main weapon. There is a lot of depth for how it could be used, and if it could just get buffed and tweaked a little bit more, I could see it going back to perfect. Our final category are the rest of the Splatoon 1 special reworks. First up, we have Trizuka. With the positives, I think the special is very satisfying and fun to use. The idea of a limited 3-shot count and very low duration are good mechanics for it that makes you feel like you have to time and pick your shots very carefully while still feeling somewhat rushed to do it. The end lag on the special also feels very reasonable, and it's pretty fluid. It's easy to switch between the main weapon, using the special, and going back to the weapon. Trizuka has a unique speed penalty in which you have a limited swimming speed while you have it active, which is a very unique way to punish it if you are up close using the special. However, Trizuka also has a lot of downsides. The idea that you can use this as a panic button and hit someone cross-map is dumb. If you play any slow weapon, you can just die for using your gun to a panicked Trizuka. This was an issue that they fixed in Splatoon 1 and then forgot to do in this game. The one-shot hitbox is also very dumb. Sometimes it goes literally through people and does not one-shot them. Another time, you can shoot, miss, and then have one of the 3 bullets that don't hit the wall curve around it and hit someone behind a wall. Like, what the hell is this? I like the idea of 3 bullets visually coming out of the weapon, but it leads to yet another Trizuka with a very strange hitbox that should probably be something else.
Zuka has some redeeming qualities, for sure, but the abundance of overtuned stats and poor design choices makes it harder to salvage than even Splatoon 1 Zuka. It's a mixed bag to me, and honestly closer to going lower than higher. Third to last on this ranking is the Big Bubbler. Now there's some important positives here. It teaches very good positioning for support players by forcing you to position in the exact spot you want to have the bubble. The cooldown as well that's tied to the bubble is a really cool mechanic to punish bad bubblers. It's an entire 15 seconds until the bubble is broken normally, so if you use a bad one, people can leave it up and then you have to wait forever to get another one. The beacon inside of the bubble is really cool, and on top of that, I think it has an interesting set of weak points with both the bubble and the thing on top of it. However, Big Bubbler's got some problems. The HP shield is not really great for the game, which is a big point. Big Bubbler leads to a lot of very bad interactions. There are a lot of times where Bubbler either feels too free or too weak, and the times it feels too free are some of the worst interactions in the game. Sometimes you are just absolutely helpless depending on the situation. It does not feel like there is a whole lot of back and forth when there should be. This special also has major balancing issues. If this special was anywhere above decent, it would feel even more horrible than it already does, so it's pretty much impossible to make good. I also don't like how even when you get in the bubble itself, the beacon in the middle can be a mini shield too, which for some weapons can mean you once again have to get through another barrier. I think shots should just pierce through it. Players should be rewarded for getting inside the bubble better.
And of course, bubble on objective can be a bit cheesy, particularly on tower, where the ability to protect people there is so strong, they literally had to lower its duration when it was used on tower. Which helps, but it still feels very dumb.
I will say that at least the quality of life stuff to bubble more recently has been good. It had 2 annoying issues, one where you wouldn't have paint under you when you used it, and 2 where it wouldn't work on ledges. Both of these got fixed.
I'm gonna be honest, guys, while this special is way better than stuff like armor and the original bubbler that game before it, I just think that an HP dome isn't really the thing this game needs, and pretty much every positive bubble has outside of the beacon is something that Ink Vacuum also has. So, I don't know, maybe just give the beacon to Wavebreaker or something instead. Next up is Triple Ink Strike. Now I remember when we saw this pre-launch, Tri-Strike was something that I liked quite a lot. Coming from Splatoon 2, a game with so many displacement specials with limited counterplay, seeing one that actually had important downsides and limited range was a breath of fresh air. For the positives, I think that this special is visually very cool and that praise was mostly accurate. It is great to see a displacement special that has a lot of reasonable ways to deal with it. Tri-Strike has become a very important counter to HP specials. However, this special has a lot of downsides that are very worth talking about. First off, the counterplay was overdone. This special feels horrible to use. You cannot swim, you cannot use your sub, and you cannot use your main weapon. That's a little bit too much. We kinda overtuned the strikes as well, so it's hard to fix them. Since launch, the strikes have a larger radius and much more damage. This special has a nickname called the Touch of Death, which is a term for slightly touching the outside of a tri-strike and instantly exploding. That was not a thing in the game at the start of it. On top of that, the speed of which Strike paints means that it can cheese some of the smaller zones in the game. You see this on maps like Brinewater, Mako, or Maki, which, again, partially a zone that probably shouldn't be that small, but partially still on the special. If it exploded a bit slower, you could paint over it similar to Booyah Bomb. It has a major spam issue. When we did see a lot of Tri-Strike, it was on Neo Splash where you would farm it, throw all three, and instantly start farming the other one. Like with Booyah Bomb, this has some dumb interactions with the tower in tower control as well. It just doesn't really feel very fun, feels very overtuned on the opponent's side, and honestly, I'm just disappointed. Reef Slider is one special that got butchered by patches, but Tri-Strike is another. This should have been one of the best displacement specials the series had ever designed. But rather than making the weak points of the special a little bit better and being careful on buffing the strikes themselves, we instead overbuff the strikes, making them feel annoying to go against, while keeping the original mode and weakness of it feeling horrible to use. This special needs a rework where we give some things back to it, maybe allow it to use its sub-weapon a little bit, or have a few shots on the main weapon, and then because of that we can make the Tri-Strikes explode a little bit slower, and keep the damage only on objects but not on players. Something like that could be a Tri-Strike that's up in the great category, but the one we have right now is down here. I think the patches have really ruined the potential this special had, and it really needs to be revisited. But with that being said, we have one special left, the reworked echolocator, Wavebreaker. For the positives, I think Wave is a very fun and unique mechanic that feels fair to go against. Most of the counters to sharking have had a similar issue to those with backlines, which is, okay, you just get located because someone else said so. In this case, you can try to do a small jump giving away your location, but not get located entirely, which is a really unique way to try to deal with the special that gives some options against it. On top of that, the deployment range forces a lot of creativity and proper positioning from the Wavebreaker user. In addition to this, I think the unique combos it has due to its high damage number make it very nice in terms of the weapons it's paired with. On things like Range Blaster or Dually Squelcher, for example, it feels really good when it does actually work. Now, the special's not perfect. I think it feels really weak right now. Mainly the HP just feels oddly balanced. Why does Object Shredder, E-Liter, or Stamper get to literally one-shot it? On top of that, I think the height limit is kind of restrictive. There is a lot of Wavebreaker locations I think could be really cool, but it just barely doesn't reach high enough. Which means Wavebreaker is being used in more exposed locations where the HP becomes a problem. Like with Rain, this special got more depth added to it via this initial location idea. You basically get a mini point sensor about 2/3 the radius of the actual Wavebreaker itself that tags people for 1.5 seconds. This is a small enough amount of time to not be annoying for opponents, while giving new utility to the special since you can throw it to more quickly clear an area. However, the balance is just still really lacking on this. This special is the one I most easily see being moved to perfect with a few more changes, but right now it just doesn't feel satisfying enough for me to put it a bit higher. So with that being said, that is my complete special ranking. So what would be my scores out of 10? For reference, Splatoon 2 is about a 3 out of 10 at this point for me, and Splatoon 1 is like a 4. This game is definitely a huge leap when it comes to the design of its specials, and that on top of having so many of them gives a lot to look at. While I think that many of the patches have made some of these specials worse, some have also made them better, and I think as a whole, I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. Not as high as I initially thought, but still a huge step up when compared to the rest of the series. Thanks so much for watching. I know this was a really long one. Please consider subscribing or sharing the video if you enjoyed. This took a ton of work, and I will see you all in the next video. Also unrelated, but I don't care since I'm doing number scores right now. Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze is a 10 out of 10 video game, and I feel the need to put that out there. It is amazing. Okay, that's it. Bye.